I stood at the edge of the banquet hall holding a microphone I didn't remember asking for. 200 faces turned toward me. Colleagues, relatives, friends who weren't really friends. My husband sat at the center table, 58 years old today, smiling that public smile he'd perfected over decades. The same smile he'd worn in our wedding photos. The same smile in every family portrait. I'd been married to that smile for 27 years. The microphone was heavy. Someone had handed it to me during dessert, assuming I'd want to say something sweet, something appropriate. The kind of tribute a devoted wife delivers at her husband's milestone birthday. I looked down at my hands, dry, older than I expected them to be. When had my knuckles started to look like my mother's? Speech! Speech! Someone called from the back. My husband's smile widened. He raised his wine glass slightly, encouraging me, trusting me. Why wouldn't he? I'd never given him a reason not to trust me. I'd been so remarkably trustworthy. I brought the microphone closer to my lips. The feedback screeched slightly. People winced. I've been practicing what to say tonight, I began. My voice sounded strange through the speakers, flatter than I expected. I wanted to get it right. My husband nodded, still smiling, because 25 years is a long time to keep a secret. The smile didn't fade immediately. It took 3 full seconds. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. Then something behind his eyes shifted. Not panic exactly, but recognition. The kind of recognition you see in someone's face when they realize they've left the stove on, or forgotten to lock a door that should have stayed locked. I didn't say anything else. Not yet. I just stood there, holding the microphone, watching that recognition spread across the room like spilled wine. His sister stopped mid-bite. His business partner set down his fork with unusual care. Our daughter, home from college for the weekend, leaned forward slightly, her face already forming a question I wouldn't be able to answer tonight. The silence felt thick. Breathing felt thick. I'd spent 25 years learning how to breathe in rooms that were too thick with things nobody said. It started when our daughter was 3 years old. I didn't know that then, of course. I only learned the timeline 2 weeks ago, sitting in our lawyer's office while he explained the evidence. The dates, the bank statements, the hotel receipts going back to 2000, 25 years of Tuesday evenings working late, 25 years of weekend conferences and client emergencies, 25 years of me cooking dinner for one, putting our daughter to bed alone, telling her daddy was building a better future for us. He was good at it. The lying. Not in the dramatic way people imagine. No lipstick on collars or mysterious phone calls. No unexplained absences that couldn't be accounted for. Everything he did made perfect sense. His career required travel. Clients needed attention. Success demanded sacrifice. I believed him because the lies were boring. They were so tediously, numbingly boring that suspicion felt paranoid. She was his assistant. Of course she was his assistant. That's where these things always begin, isn't it? In the convenient proximity of shared calendars and coffee runs and late nights at the office when everyone else has gone home. Her name was Jennifer, 34 years old now. She'd been 29 when it started. I'd met her dozens of times. She'd come to our home for company dinners. She'd brought a gift when our daughter graduated high school. She called me Mrs. Patterson and complimented my cooking, and once helped me pick out a birthday present for my husband because she knew his taste so well. She did know his taste. Better than I did, apparently. The cruelty wasn't in the affair itself, though that was cruel enough. The cruelty was in how unremarkable it all was. How ordinary. Tuesday evenings, weekend conferences. The slow, steady architecture of deception built so carefully that it became indistinguishable from normal life. I found out because Jennifer got pregnant. Not with his child. She'd been careful about that, according to the messages I eventually read. But pregnant by someone else. Someone she actually planned to marry. And in her happiness, in her relief at finally having something real and legitimate, she'd written him a long email about boundaries, about endings, about how it was time to stop. He'd left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. I'd picked it up to move it, make space for the groceries. The email was there. Not hidden, not protected. Just there, like a coffee cup or a set of keys. 25 years is enough, she'd written. You know it is. I'd stood in our kitchen reading that sentence over and over. 25 years is enough. Enough of what? Enough of him? Enough of me being too stupid to notice? Enough of whatever small, terrible compromise she'd been making every Tuesday evening for 2.5 decades? I didn't confront him that day, or the next day, or the day after that. I just continued. I made dinner, I asked about his meetings, I kissed him goodnight with the same distracted affection I'd been offering for years, because some part of me, some deeply conditioned part, still believed that if I didn't say it out loud, it might not be completely true. Denial, I've learned, isn't about refusing to see reality. It's about protecting yourself from having to decide what to do about it. 2 weeks passed before I looked at his laptop again. This time I looked deliberately, methodically. I went through years of emails while he was at, where else, the office. Working late, probably with Jennifer, probably having the kinds of conversations I'd stopped having with him sometime in our 30s. The messages weren't passionate. That's what surprised me most. No declarations of love, no poetry, just logistics, meeting times, hotel names, brief exchanges about whether Thursday would work better than Friday, practical, efficient. The same tone he used when discussing grocery lists or dental appointments. There were photographs, not sexual ones. I'd been prepared for that somehow, braced for it. But vacation photos. The two of them on a beach I didn't recognize. Her laughing at something he'd said. Him looking at her the way men look at women when they're genuinely interested in making them happy. I'd never seen him look at me that way. Not even in the beginning. I closed the laptop and sat on our bed, my side of the bed, the left side, which I'd been sleeping on for 27 years, and tried to remember the last time my husband had seemed genuinely interested in my happiness. Not in keeping me content. Not in maintaining household peace, but in the specific, attentive way you're interested when someone's inner life still surprises you. I couldn't remember. Maybe that was my fault too. Maybe I'd become boring, predictable. The kind of wife who fit so seamlessly into domestic routine that she stopped being a person and became a function. Cook dinner, do laundry, attend his work events, smile in photos. I'd gotten very good at smiling in photos. Our daughter called that evening. She was stressed about midterms, worried about a roommate situation, asking advice about a boy who was sending mixed signals. I listened and offered suggestions and told her I loved her. After we hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand, thinking about mixed signals. About signals that weren't mixed at all, just ignored. How many signals had I ignored? The Tuesday evenings that became routine, the weekends when he seemed relieved to leave, the gradual disappearance of physical affection, not dramatic, just less. A slow fade. The way he'd stopped asking about my day sometime around our 10th anniversary. The way I'd stopped expecting him to. We'd become roommates who shared a last name and a mortgage, polite strangers who occasionally attended family functions together. I wondered if Jennifer knew about the silence, if he'd told her about the long, empty evenings in our house, if he'd described me as cold or distant or impossible to please. That's what men usually say, isn't it? My wife doesn't understand me. As if understanding were something women failed to provide rather than something men failed to earn. I started watching him differently after that. Not confronting, just watching. Observing the small mechanisms of his deception. How he'd shower immediately after coming home from late meetings. How he'd become suddenly interested in his phone during dinner, texting clients who apparently needed his attention at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. How he'd pat my shoulder when he passed me in the kitchen. Not affection, a pat. The gesture you'd give a dog or a child. Acknowledgement without engagement. I began to understand something during those weeks of watching. The affair wasn't the betrayal. The affair was the symptom. The actual betrayal was how thoroughly he'd erased me as a person. How completely I disappeared from his emotional landscape while continuing to function in his practical one. I cooked his meals, I managed his household. I attended his company events and made conversation with his colleagues and laughed at his boss's unfunny jokes. I was a wife in every visible way. But I was not real to him. I hadn't been real to him in years. His birthday was 6 weeks away when I found out. 6 weeks of sitting across from him at dinner, passing salt, asking about his day, maintaining the elaborate theater of our marriage. 6 weeks of him not knowing that I knew. 6 weeks of me watching him lie with such practiced ease that I wondered if he'd forgotten how to tell the truth. I thought about confronting him quietly, privately, the way reasonable adults handle marital crisis. We could sit down in our living room, the same living room where we decorated 27 Christmas trees, and have a calm conversation about boundaries and counseling and whether this marriage could be saved. But I didn't want it saved. That was the realization that came slowly, reluctantly, like admitting you've been cold for hours but only just noticed. I didn't want him anymore. Not as a husband, possibly not as a person. What I wanted was for him to feel something, anything, the discomfort of being seen, the humiliation of being exposed. Not because I was vindictive, though maybe I was vindictive, maybe I'd earned that, but because I needed to know if he could still feel shame. So I started planning his birthday party. A big one. The biggest we'd ever had. I told him I wanted to celebrate properly. 58 years, nearly 30 years of marriage, his successful career. He seemed pleased, maybe even touched. "You don't have to go to all that trouble," he said in that tone men use when they absolutely want you to go to that trouble, but need to pretend they don't. "I want to," I told him, and I did. I invited everyone, his colleagues from the firm, His college friends, his extended family, our neighbors, his clients, the ones he actually had meetings with, and the ones who were just convenient cover stories. I invited Jennifer. She RSVP'd yes almost immediately, probably relieved to maintain the appearance of normalcy. I booked the banquet hall at his favorite hotel, the one with the view of the harbor, the one he'd always said was too expensive for casual occasions. I ordered his favorite food. I hired a photographer. I created a slideshow of photos from throughout our marriage, our wedding, our daughter's birth, vacations, holidays, all the documented evidence of a life built together. He kissed my cheek when he saw the preparations coming together. "You're amazing," he said. "I don't deserve you." The first honest thing he'd said in 25 years. I wrote my speech carefully, revised it, cut unnecessary words, practiced the pacing. I wanted to get it right. Not just what I said, but how I said it. The tone, the timing, the slow unraveling of his public image in front of everyone whose opinion he valued. I wasn't planning to give details. I didn't need to. I just needed to say enough. Enough to crack the surface. Enough to let everyone glimpse what lived underneath our carefully maintained marriage. Our daughter came home 2 days before the party. She hugged me at the door and immediately started talking about school, about her classes, about the boy who was still sending mixed signals. I made her favorite dinner and listened and did not tell her what was coming. She deserved better than to find out the way she was going to find out. But I couldn't warn her. If I warned her, she'd try to stop me. Or worse, she'd try to fix it. To mediate. To convince me that private conversations and family therapy could somehow repair 25 years of systematic erasure. Some things can't be repaired. They can only be ended. I woke up on his birthday and made coffee. He was still asleep. He'd always been a late sleeper on weekends. I sat at the kitchen table watching morning light move across the floor and tried to feel something other than numbness. Anger would have been appropriate. Righteous fury. The kind of emotion that justifies dramatic action. But I just felt tired. Hollowed out. Like I'd been tired for 25 years and only just noticed. When he came downstairs, I'd already set out his favorite breakfast. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit. The same breakfast I'd been making for him every weekend for 2 decades. He kissed the top of my head. Another pat. Another gesture of ownership rather than affection. And sat down. "Big day," he said. "Yes," I agreed. "You nervous about the party?" "No." He looked at me then. Really looked. And for a moment I thought he might see it. The change. The decision. The absolute stillness of someone who's already left, even though their body hasn't caught up yet. But he didn't see it. He smiled and ate his eggs and scrolled through his phone and did not notice that the woman across from him was no longer his wife in any meaningful sense. She was just someone playing the role of his wife until the performance ended. Our daughter came downstairs an hour later, already dressed for the party. She'd always been punctual, organized, responsible. All the things I'd taught her to be. All the things that made women easy to overlook. "You look nice, Mom," she said, noticing my dress. I'd chosen carefully, elegant but simple. Nothing that screamed, "I'm about to end my marriage in front of 200 people. Just appropriate. "Thank you. Are you okay? You seem—" "I'm fine." She studied me with the particular intensity of adult children who've learned to read their parents' silences. But she was 23, still young enough to believe that fine meant something other than holding very still so I don't shatter. We drove to the banquet hall in 2 cars, him going early to greet early arrivals, me and our daughter coming later with last-minute items. In the car, my daughter was quiet. Finally, she said, "Is something going on with you and Dad?" I should have lied, should have protected her for a few more hours, but I was so tired of lying. "Yes. Are you guys separating?" "After tonight, probably." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Does he know?" "Not yet." "Mom." "I know," I said. "I know this isn't fair to you. I know this is going to be awful and public, and you'll probably be angry with me for a long time. But I need you to trust that I wouldn't do this unless I had to." "What did he do?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "He's been having an affair. For 25 years. The silence in the car became absolute. I watched her process it in the rearview mirror. Disbelief, denial, the mathematical calculation of her own age against the timeline. The realization that her father had been lying before she could walk. "Jennifer?" she asked finally. "Yes." I knew something was— She didn't finish the sentence. What was there to finish? I knew something was wrong but did nothing. I knew something was strange but convinced myself it was normal. We all knew, in the way families know things they can't afford to acknowledge. "Tonight is going to be hard," I told her. "You don't have to stay if you don't want to." "I'll stay." "Okay." We didn't speak for the rest of the drive. The party started at 6. By 6:30, the banquet hall was full of people drinking wine and eating appetizers and telling my husband how great he looked for 58. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence, shaking hands, accepting compliments, being the version of himself he'd always been in public. Charming, successful, beloved. Jennifer was there, standing near the bar with a man I assumed was her fiancé. She wore a simple navy dress and smiled politely when people spoke to her. She looked at my husband exactly 3 times in the first hour. Quick glances, immediately redirected. The choreography of people who've learned to be invisible to each other in public. I wondered if she knew what was coming, if she'd sensed it, but her face showed nothing except mild pleasantness, the expression of someone attending an obligatory work function, where nothing interesting would happen. I moved through the crowd too, thanking people for coming, accepting their compliments on the party, on my dress, on what a wonderful couple we made. 30 years next year, someone said. You must be so proud. I said, a sound that could mean anything. The dinner was served at 7, long tables filled with his favorite foods. Speeches began during dessert, his business partner talking about his dedication and integrity, his college roommate sharing embarrassing stories from their 20s, his sister becoming tearful while describing what a devoted family man he'd always been. I sat at the main table next to him, my hand resting near his on the white tablecloth. Not touching, just near. The same distance we'd been maintaining for years. Close enough to appear connected, far enough to never actually reach each other. Our daughter sat across from us, her face carefully neutral. She hadn't eaten much. This is wonderful, my husband whispered to me during his sister's speech. Thank you. I nodded, smiled. The same smile I'd been using for 27 years. After his sister finished, there was that pause, that expectant moment when everyone looks at the wife, waiting for her to stand and deliver the final emotional tribute, the summation of their marriage in touching anecdotes and grateful praise. Someone handed me the microphone. I stood slowly, deliberately, giving myself time to change my mind, to choose differently, to protect him and our daughter and myself from what came next. But I didn't choose differently. I brought the microphone to my lips and began to speak. After I said 25 years is a long time to keep a secret, the silence stretched. It wasn't the comfortable silence of people waiting for a punchline. It was the uncomfortable silence of people beginning to understand there wouldn't be one. My husband's face had gone very still. Not blank, controlled. He was already calculating, already trying to determine how much I knew and how much damage I was about to do. I'd seen that expression before, in different contexts. When clients confronted him with unexpected problems, when budget reports didn't match his projections, the look of a man shifting immediately into damage control. Honey, he said very quietly, trying to keep it between us even though the microphone was already broadcasting everything. Maybe we should, for 25 years, I continued, my voice steady through the speakers. My husband has been having an affair with his assistant. Some of you know her. Jennifer Parker. She's here tonight, actually, near the bar. I didn't point. I didn't need to. Everyone turned to look anyway. A wave of heads swiveling in unison. Jennifer's face went white, then red. Her fiancé's expression changed from confusion to something harder to name. Not anger yet. Still processing. Still trying to understand what was being said and whether it could possibly be true. Mom! My daughter's voice, small and horrified. My husband stood up so abruptly his chair fell backward. This isn't the place. Where should I have done it? I asked, and I was genuinely curious. In private? Where you could manage the narrative? Where you could convince me it wasn't what it looked like? Where you could promise to change while already planning which lies you'd tell next? You're embarrassing yourself, he said. Low, threatening. The voice he'd never used with me before because he'd never needed to. No, I said. I'm embarrassing you. There's a difference. The room had gone absolutely quiet. 200 people frozen in their chairs, wine glasses halfway to mouths, forks suspended above plates. The photographer had stopped taking pictures. Even the waitstaff had stilled, backing against the walls like they might somehow avoid being implicated in whatever was happening. It started when our daughter was 3, I said. Not because everyone needed to know, but because I needed to say it. Out loud. Where it couldn't be dismissed or minimized or reframed as something other than what it was. 25 years of Tuesday evenings, weekend conferences, late nights at the office, 25 years of me believing him when he said success required sacrifice. He was right about that part. Someone had to be sacrificed. It just wasn't him. Stop, he said. Not asking. Commanding. I looked at him, really looked at him, and tried to find the person I'd married. The man who'd held my hand during our wedding vows. Who'd cried when our daughter was born. Who'd promised me things he'd probably meant in that moment, before meaning them became inconvenient. I couldn't find him. Maybe he'd never existed. Maybe I'd invented him out of necessity and hope, and the deep human need to believe the person you've chosen is worth the choosing. I've spent weeks trying to understand why, I continued. Why 25 years? Why not just leave? Why maintain this elaborate performance of marriage while having what you actually wanted somewhere else? And I think I finally understand. It wasn't about love or happiness or any of the things people have affairs for. It was about convenience. I looked at Jennifer then. She was crying silently, her fiancé's arm around her shoulders, but whether to comfort or restrain I couldn't tell. Leaving would have been complicated, I said. Expensive, disruptive. It would have required explaining himself to people whose opinions mattered. Our daughter, his parents, colleagues, clients. So he just didn't. He kept both lives. The respectable one with me, the enjoyable one with her. And it worked because I was too trusting or too stupid or too busy raising our child alone to notice. That's not, he started. Don't, I said, and my voice came out harder than I'd intended. Don't insult me by lying now. I've read the emails. I've seen the hotel receipts. I've done the math. 25 years of Tuesday evenings. 25 years of me making dinner for one. 25 years of our daughter asking when Daddy was coming home and me telling her he was working hard for our future. I turned to our daughter then. She was crying too, but different from Jennifer. Angry tears, hurt tears, the tears of someone whose entire childhood was being retroactively rewritten. I'm sorry, I told her. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'm sorry I couldn't warn you. I'm sorry your father wasn't the person you thought he was. He's still my father, she said, and I heard the defense in her voice, the desperate need to protect something, even now, especially now. Yes, I agreed. He is, and you'll have to figure out what that means for you, but I can't protect him anymore. I can't pretend this didn't happen. I can't smile in photos and attend company dinners and maintain the fiction that we're happy while he lives a completely separate life every Tuesday evening. My husband's business partner stood up. I think maybe we should all stay, I said. Please. You came to celebrate him. You should know who you're celebrating. Jesus Christ, my husband said. He looked around the room, trying to find allies, people who'd side with him against the crazy wife having a public breakdown. But everyone was just staring, uncomfortable, uncertain, witnessing something intimate and terrible that they'd spend years trying to explain to people who hadn't been there. I don't hate you, I told my husband, and this was the truest thing I'd said. I'm not even that angry anymore. Mostly I'm just tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of being the person you pretend with. Tired of existing in the margins of your real life. What do you want? He asked. Practical. Already moving past the embarrassment to the negotiation. What do you want me to say? Nothing, I said. There's nothing left to say. I just wanted you to know that I know. That everyone knows. That you can't unknow that I know. That every time you see me from now on, you'll remember that I stood here and said this out loud. I set the microphone down on the table. It made a dull thunk that echoed through the speakers. Happy birthday, I said. Then I walked out. I walked through the silent banquet hall toward the exit. 200 people watched me pass. No one stopped me. No one said anything. What was there to say? The photographers didn't take pictures. The servers stayed pressed against the walls. Even the ambient music seemed to have stopped, though maybe that was just my perception. My daughter caught up to me in the parking lot. Mom, wait. I stopped but didn't turn around. I was afraid if I looked at her, I'd start crying, and I'd promised myself I wouldn't cry. Not today. Not where anyone could see. Why did you do it that way? Her voice was thick with tears. Because he wouldn't have heard it any other way. You humiliated him. You humiliated me. I know. Everyone we know was in there. My friends' parents, your friends, our family. I know. So why? I turned to face her then. She looked so young standing there in her nice dress with tears running down her face, young enough that part of her still believed there must be a good explanation for all of this. Young enough to think her mother wouldn't do something this cruel without sufficient reason. Because I needed everyone to see him, I said. Not the version of him he presents in public. The real him. The one who could look at me every day for 25 years while lying. The one who could watch me raise our daughter alone and never question whether that was fair. The one who could have two completely separate lives and feel nothing about the person living in his shadow. You could have told me privately. And what would you have done? Asked me to forgive him? Suggested counseling? Convinced yourself that people make mistakes and marriages can survive betrayal if everyone tries hard enough? She was quiet. Because yes, that's exactly what she would have done. I'm not that woman, I told her. I'm not the woman who forgives this. I'm not the woman who finds a way to understand or accommodate or move past it. I'm just done. What happens now? I don't know. I'll stay at a hotel tonight. Tomorrow I'll call a lawyer. We'll divide the house and the bank accounts and the accumulated debris of 30 years together. It won't be complicated. He'll probably be relieved. Will you ever forgive him? I thought about that. Really thought about it. Forgiveness implied that something could be restored or reconciled, but there was nothing left to restore. The marriage I'd thought I had never existed. I'd been living in a performance while he lived in reality. I don't think forgiveness is the right word, I said. I might stop being angry eventually. I might even understand, in some distant academic way, why he did what he did, but I don't think I'll ever forgive him for making me complicit in my own erasure, for turning me into someone who existed only to maintain his convenience. She hugged me then, hard and sudden. I love you. I love you too. So much. And I'm sorry for what this does to you, for what you'll have to explain to people, for how complicated this makes everything. He made it complicated, not you. I pulled back to look at her. You don't have to choose sides. Yes, I do, she said. And I choose you. I signed the divorce papers in a conference room with beige walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. My lawyer sat next to me. My husband's lawyer sat across from us. My husband wasn't there. His lawyer said he'd authorized everything, agreed to all terms, wanted to expedite the process. Of course he did. Speed meant less scrutiny, less time for people to ask questions or demand explanations, less opportunity for additional humiliation. The settlement was generous. More than generous. The house, most of the savings, my choice of vehicles, maintenance until I found full-time work. His lawyer had made the offer immediately, barely negotiated. Hush money dressed up as marital assets. He wants this done quickly, my lawyer had told me during our prep meeting. He's worried about his reputation, his firm. Clients might reconsider relationships if they think he's unstable or dishonest. He is unstable and dishonest, I'd said. Yes, but they don't have to know that. Except they all knew. Everyone who'd been at that party knew, and they'd told others. The story had spread the way stories like this always spread. Quickly, thoroughly, with embellishments. I'd become a local legend. The woman who'd destroyed her marriage at her husband's birthday party. Some people thought I was brave. Some thought I was vindictive. Some thought I was crazy. I didn't care what they thought. I moved into a small apartment downtown. 2 bedrooms, high ceilings, windows that faced east so I woke up with the sun. I bought new furniture. Nothing from the house. I didn't want anything that carried the weight of those years. My daughter visited often. She'd stopped speaking to her father entirely, which I hadn't asked for but secretly appreciated. She said he'd tried calling several times, sending messages, asking to meet for coffee and explain. She'd ignored all of it. I don't want his explanations, she told me. I don't want to hear about how complicated it was or how he never meant to hurt anyone. He had 25 years to tell the truth. He chose this. Jennifer had broken up with her fiancé. Or he'd broken up with her. I'd heard both versions. Either way, the engagement was over. Someone told me she'd left the firm, moved to a different city. I hoped she'd learned something from all this, but I doubted it. People rarely learn from their mistakes. They just make different ones. I started therapy. Twice-a-week sessions with a woman named Dr. Morrison who didn't offer easy answers or platitudes. She just listened while I tried to untangle 27 years of increasingly obvious warning signs I'd somehow missed. You didn't miss them, she said during our 4th session. You saw them. You chose to interpret them as normal marriage difficulties rather than systematic deception. What's the difference? Normal marriage difficulties don't require one person to be completely invisible. Invisible. That was the right word. I'd been so thoroughly erased from my own life that I'd started to forget I was supposed to be there. I got a job teaching English at a community college. Part-time, modest salary, but mine. My own work, my own schedule, my own students who didn't know anything about me except that I graded fairly and answered emails promptly. I made one new friend, a woman named Patricia who taught history and had gone through her own ugly divorce 5 years earlier. We had lunch together twice a week and didn't talk about our ex-husbands. We talked about books and politics and the particular frustrations of grading essays written by students who clearly hadn't read the assignment. Normal things, small things, things that didn't require performing or pretending or maintaining elaborate fictions. Slowly, in small increments, I started to remember what it felt like to exist, without permission. 6 months after the party, I ran into Jennifer at a coffee shop. She was alone, sitting in the corner with a laptop, and when she looked up and saw me, her entire body tensed like she might run. I could have left, should have, probably. But I walked over to her table and said, "Can I sit?" She stared at me. Why? I don't know. She gestured to the chair across from her. We sat in silence for a long moment. The coffee shop sounds, espresso machines, quiet conversation, acoustic music, filled the space between us. "I'm sorry," she said finally. I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am sorry. For which part? All of it. The lying, the years, the way you found out, the birthday party? She winced. Yeah, that. I'm not sorry about the party, I said. I'm sorry for a lot of things. For not paying attention. For letting myself become so small. For teaching my daughter that being convenient is more important than being valued. But I'm not sorry about the party. Everyone saw, she said quietly. That was the point. He lost clients. His firm demoted him. Good. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something in her face I hadn't expected. Recognition. She understood, maybe for the first time, that this wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about refusing to protect someone at my own expense. He calls me sometimes, she said. Wants to restart things. Says now that you know we don't have to hide anymore. And? I told him no. Whatever we had, it was only possible because it was secret. Because it was separate from real life. The minute it became real, it stopped being what I wanted. I nodded. That made sense. Affairs were fantasies. They existed outside normal time and consequences. The minute they had to operate in reality, with obligations and compromises and the daily friction of actual partnership, they collapsed under their own weight. What will you do? I asked. I don't know. Leave the city, probably. Start over somewhere nobody knows this story. That's smart. What about you? I'm already starting over. We sat there a little longer. Not friends. We'd never be friends. But not enemies either. Just two women who'd spent years existing in relation to the same man's choices, and were now trying to figure out who they were without him. When I left the coffee shop, I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel vindicated or satisfied or even particularly sad. I just felt tired. The kind of tired that comes after carrying something heavy for so long that you've forgotten it was heavy until you finally set it down. A year after the party, my daughter asked me if I'd do it differently if I could go back. The party, she clarified. Would you still do it that way? We were in my apartment drinking tea, the afternoon light making patterns on the floor. She visited every Sunday now. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. She'd started therapy too, working through her own complicated feelings about her father, about their relationship, about what it meant that half her childhood had been built on lies. I thought about her question carefully. Probably not, I admitted. It was cruel. It hurt people who didn't deserve to be hurt. It made you carry a burden you shouldn't have had to carry. But I don't regret it. I needed to say it out loud. I needed witnesses. I needed everyone to see what I'd spent so long pretending didn't exist. If I'd done it quietly, in a lawyer's office or a private conversation, he would have found a way to control the narrative, to make it smaller than it was, to make me seem irrational or vindictive or unable to understand the complexity of adult relationships. Do people still talk about it? Probably. People love a scandal, but I don't hear it anymore. I've built a life that doesn't include those people. Are you happy? I considered that. Happy felt like too big a word, too simple. I'm not unhappy. I'm present. I exist in my own life now instead of in the margins of someone else's. She nodded. He tried to contact me again last week. What did he say? That he misses me, that he made mistakes but he's still my father, that he hopes someday I can forgive him. What did you tell him? That I need more time. That's fair. Do you think you'll ever talk to him again? I don't know. Maybe. If there's ever a reason that doesn't involve him trying to rewrite history or extract forgiveness, but I don't think about him much anymore. He's just someone I used to know. We sat in comfortable silence, drinking our tea, watching the light change. Some endings don't explode, they just fade. See you in the next video.